Hello friends, welcome to the Cold War Prepper. My name is Lee, and today I'm going to try to get into 4 different subjects. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to try to be no longer than 8 minutes, so I may cut it short. But I want to, number 1, an apology and an explanation. Number 2, continuation of what we were talking about yesterday. My theories about Red Dawn, the draft, and martial law. And so let's go back and recap one of the things that happened yesterday. And yesterday, I said, everything looks like the Chinese coup is a rumor, in multiple sources rumor. A lot more information to come out today, and it confirms the fact that it's probably more rumor than anything else. Nobody's getting any solid evidence. Somebody kind of took a different view of that, and told me to go research it in a Chinese newspaper. And I'm an intelligence analyst. So here's what happens. I have intelligence collectors out in the field, and I'm also a college professor. I have students out in their desks. They write me a thesis. And they have a bibliography down at the bottom. They don't say, "Hey, professor, go research this yourself." My intelligence analysts give me the raw data that tell me this is happening. This is what we're seeing from our end, and I put all that together. So I kind of research my own stuff before I say it to you. I don't have the time to go out and prove your point of view. So if you want your point of view to be taken seriously, give me the link, give me the data, give me the source that you're using to oppose what I'm saying. And you know what? 50% of the time, if I'm going to say that differently. If I'm wrong, I will admit it, and I will accept your data if it's from a credible source, and change my opinion. That's I can't argue facts and data, but I'm not going to go research your proposition for you. That's your job. And I'm researching mine. I don't want to research both of ours. You research yours. If you find contrary facts, let me know. We'll see what we can do to meld those two together. Remember, I believe in Georg Hegel, and he said that there's a thesis, an antithesis, and then the two of them conflict and become a new synthesis. That synthesis then becomes a new thesis. So there's this Hegelian dialectic, which is this ever-increasing spiral of knowledge, because two people have facts that they're going at each other with, and it usually ends up in a synthesis of ideas. And so that's my purpose, is I want to make sure that we can get good information out there, especially for the people who are watching me, because I want to have credibility. So if I just let people say things that as fact that aren't proven fact, then that ruins all of our credibility. Now, if you say I believe, or I think, or I suppose, that's something that's not factual based. That's emotional, personal opinion based, and I can't argue with that. So if you preface it with "this is my belief" or "my understanding" or whatever, I'll let that go. But if you state it as a fact, I want to know where you got your facts from. Okay, so let's talk about the Red Dawn. So when I did my initial research, and I'll give you the table of organization of equipment, that is the current number of ships and aircraft, minus the fact that there have been some of the Russian landing craft that have been sunk in the Black Sea recently by the Blue and Gold country. So I think they've lost 4, 2 Alligator class and 2 other smaller landing ships. But anyhow, when you take a look at their aircraft and you take a look at their ships, and then you understand their organizational structure. So you take a look at the spaces they have, then you take a look at the organizational structure, you say, oh, they can fit this and this. So number 1, I'm going to link a real good article below, that they have more airborne than they have lift capability. Makes sense. We had 3 times more airborne than we had lift capability at Operation Market Garden in 1944. And they took the 101st out and dropped them off at Nijmegen. Then they had to go back and refuel, load up with the 82nd. Took them, I think they landed at Arnhem, and then they had to go back and get the British and the Polish, and take them up. So those aircraft were reused and reused. But we have a different situation here. We aren't flying just 250 miles. We're talking about thousands of miles from Vladivostok to the west coast of the U.S. And most of those aircraft only have enough fuel to make it to the U.S. They don't have enough fuel to make it back. So that would be a suicide mission. They would end up dropping those troops and then either crash landing or whatever. We do have enough military around to defend against that, by the way. So, the other thing that might be the Chinese, the same thing, but most of the Chinese landing craft are not transoceanic. Most of those landing craft are just, to make it across the Straits of China. So, they're kind of designed towards going after Taiwan. Now, we assume that 100% of all those aircraft and 100% of all those ships are going to make it across the Pacific Ocean to attack us on the West Coast. Well, let's take a look at it. First, most of their military forces are west of the Urals and west of the Caucasus. So they've got to move all those soldiers and their equipment across Siberia to Vladivostok. That's a 6 or 7 day train ride. Now they've got to get the transports that are going to transport them, and most of those right now are in Murmansk or in Kaliningrad, the Baltic Sea, or in the Black Sea, or in the Mediterranean Sea. And they've got to get those through the Suez Canal, down across India, from India across over to the Straits of Malacca, which are in between Indonesia and Malaysia, right there by the island of Penang, across over to Vietnam, then up Vietnam, along the coast of China, all the way up to Vladivostok, and then from there they will come across. That gives us all kinds of time for our intelligence assets to say, look, they're moving all this equipment to Vladivostok. Looks like we better have our defenses mounted on the Pacific Ocean. We would probably move a whole bunch of submarines, a whole bunch of anti-aircraft equipment, move some fighter aircraft to the West Coast. I don't think they would have 100% survivability of all of those. So to even say that we're going to be attacked by 2 divisions from the West Coast to East is unlikely. Yes, I do know. They do have a battalion of Chinese and a battalion of Russians down in Central America training with one of our potential adversaries in Central America. And it could be up to a brigade size for each. Well, yeah, they've got 2 brigades. Okay, they got to cross it. They got to come up through Mexico, the desert, and everything else. We'll probably have 2 days advance notice. So in order to respond to that, we have an entire Marine division in California, right there on the coast. We have the 1st Cav Division. Is it 1st Cav or is it 1st Armored? Either 1st Art Cav or 1st Armored's in Fort Bliss. And so that's another division right there on the border. We have the 3rd Infantry Division right here at Fort Hood. So we have 3 divisions that can be deployed to the border within minutes, if not hours. I would say that the 3rd Infantry Division here at Fort Hood, it would probably take 8 hours to get them to the border, to a likely crossing area or invasion spot. Now, we do have the 1st Infantry Division up at Fort Riley, and I was with them for 3 years, and we would come down to Fort Hood. So it's a 12-hour drive from Fort Riley down to Fort Hood by convoy, and then another 8 hours to the border. So within 24 hours, we could have 4 divisions on the border to defend against 2 brigades. Now, there's 3 brigades to a division, so we've got 2 against 12. So that's 1 to 6 attack odds. You're not supposed to attack unless you have 3 to 1 odds. I don't think it's going to happen. Looks like we're running a little bit overtime here, so let me just tell you about my opinion about the draft. So most people are supposed to register, and then when you move from one location to another, you're supposed to report that change of location, or else it's a felony. I don't think people are doing that, in my personal opinion, and notifying selective service. And why? Because they send you your draft notice through the mail. And so let me walk you through what I went through in 1970, and I'm sure that, in 1974 was the last draft. Things have changed with the military, but I don't think they've changed with the draft, the selective service system. So I got the envelope. I didn't open it. A whole bunch of friends of mine had been drafted, and they told me all about it. So I left it sealed, and I'd walked down to the induction center that they were told to report to, downtown El Paso. And I said, is this what I think it is? And they said, yep. And I said, do I have any options? They said, have you opened it? I said, no. And they said, as long as you haven't opened it, you got all kinds of options. So I did a whole day's worth of training, physical, what do they call it? They did a physical of me, make sure I was sound physically and all that kinds of stuff. Then they said, come back tomorrow. And I went back the next day. The first thing they showed me was a 35 millimeter film going up against the wall. And it was a guy in this silver firefighting type suit. He had a helmet on, and he bent over this barrel that blew up. He flew about 15 feet in the dust, stood up, took his helmet off, and said, you too can be explosive ordnance disposal or bomb squad. And I said, no, I can't. I want a job where I'm allowed to make one mistake, and you can't make any mistakes in that job. So the next guy came in civilian clothes. He said, we'll take you. And I said, what will I do? He says, can't tell you. I said, well, is there anything you can tell me? He says, yeah, I can tell you that you have to sign the agreement for 4-year enlistment. Then you've got 2 years of school and 2 years of service. And then number 3, there's none of us in Vietnam. I said, give me the paperwork. So now, how the training goes is what has changed. Back then, we had designated basic combat training brigades, and the one I went to, we had one at Fort Ord, California. We had one. I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and there was one, I believe, on the East Coast. But anyhow, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I went with everybody else. So I was intelligence. I had infantrymen, artillerymen, tankers, signalmen, medics. Everybody was in that basic training class. Did that for 8 weeks. Then I went to language school in Monterey, California for 47 weeks. Then I went to Goodfellow Air Force Base for 12 weeks. Then I went to NSA for another 38-week course. And so, I had 2 years of school. I moved all over the place. But now they have what they call OSUT, One Site Unit Training. And so, for example, an infantryman, 11 Bravo, which is the heart of the Army, that's the whole reason the Army exists is to support the 11 Bravo. And so he gets drafted. He's going to go to Fort Benning. He's going to do his 8 weeks of basic training right there. Then he's going to do his 4 weeks of advanced individual training, 12 weeks total. He's done. He's going to be shipped off to a unit. And so what happens is we think that everything's going to blow up over there within the next 3 months. Well, what did I just tell you? 11 Bravo is 12 weeks of training. So that means we're already behind the power curve to get the shortest amount of training performed in order to get replacements over there. So I don't think that's going to happen. We're going to be using our existing units. And right now we have, I think it's 24 or 25 total active Army, Marine, Reserve, and National Guard divisions. So we'd probably call all those up before we do anything else as far as the draft. But that's just my opinion. I don't think the draft's going to happen. As far as drafting women, I don't think that'll happen because first you have to register, and if you're not, you have to let them know you're in the age range, right, with birthday and everything else. Apply for any deferences that you might have, physical, single mother, single parent, sole surviving child, all this kinds of stuff. There are all kinds of deferments you can get, and then let them send you the letter. We're way behind the power curve as far as drafting females, so I don't think that's going to happen. So that's just my thoughts on that. I'll put the equipment list down below. I'll put a really interesting article about that. They have more airborne troops than they have aircraft down below as well. And as far as Soviet or Russian table of equipment and TONE, table of organization and equipment, I'll have to research that and get it to you. I have it memorized. This is FM 123-2-1, U.S. Army. So I might have a copy of that somewhere, but you can look up Organization of Russian Tank Division, and it will probably give everything to you. Okay, so let's do a closing quote, and the closing quote's going to be from Cicero. Where there's life, there's hope. So remember, we're all in this together, come out the other side together. Be kind, nice, and respectful to each other, and be polite, because togetherness is the key. Take care. This is Lee. Bye-bye.